Welcome to stage 16 of Misspoke, a cycling culture and culture podcast during the period of the coronavirus pandemic. By the way, I'm recording this on a new microphone, the Rode NTG microphone. Previously, I've been recording on a lavalier, or as I like to say, a lavalier, with a certain French accent. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the sound of this podcast. And we're going to start with another Coronavirus Chronicle, and this is called Cauliflower. Like everyone else, our life soon descended into a search for food, terrified that we would run out of pasta, tinned tomatoes, bread, milk, chocolate, crisps, ice cream, biscuits, and all the other things that made life enjoyable. At the start of the lockdown, while the crazy people were stockpiling and hoovering up the basics from the supermarkets, my mate Simon told me that New Covent Garden Market had started doing home deliveries of fruit and vegetables, so I rushed home to see if I could get some. Sold out, the website said. Oh well. I tried again on the following morning and my luck was in, so I jumped in and ordered a large box to be delivered in a few days. £45 plus delivery. We waited with increasing concern, worried that they would run out before our delivery was due. But in fact it turned up a few days later, 3 large boxes left on the doorstep. "Wait," said my wife. "Don't bring the boxes in the house." I took them through the side gate and put them in the garage, and we all inspected the contents from a distance, fearful of viruses, man-eating spiders, fruit flies, and whatever else lurked in fruit and veg boxes. There were potatoes, sacks of tomatoes, 2 cucumbers, courgettes, a couple of aubergines, apples, peppers, onions, carrots, a job lot of herbs in a plastic sack, pears, 2 avocados, which of course we threw away immediately, bundles of bananas, more tomatoes, and a cauliflower. Most of the produce was oversized and misshapen, not at all like the neat plastic-wrapped uniform size that we were used to buying in Sainsbury's. My daughter Rachel decided that we needed to plan our meals, something that we had never done before. "We need to make a list," she said. "See what we've got in the fridge and the cupboard and the freezer. Use everything up. Try new recipes." She was like Ma in the Grapes of Wrath, preparing to feed her hungry flock. She wrote everything down and started pouring through the recipe books. I hate planning, budgeting, thinking ahead. We were so used to going to the shops each day, buying what we fancied and cooking a meal. If we fancied steak, we went and bought steak. If we fancied kedgeree, I bought haddock and eggs and rice and cooked it. If there was a spice missing from the cupboard and the recipe asked for it, I went up to Sainsbury's and bought it. Everything was so easy before the plague came and our lives changed forever. Saturday was warm, with blue sky and the sun was shining, and the chill that had lingered in the air for months seemed to have abated. I sat in the garden with Rachel. She was planning the meal for that evening and for Sunday and the start of the following week and the next 2 months. "Don't forget the cauliflower," I said. "Cauliflower doesn't go with these meals," she said. "We need different meals then," I said. "We can't waste the cauliflower." "I don't even like cauliflower," she said. "These are difficult times," I said. "We all need to make sacrifices. You need to adapt." "What about cauliflower florets?" "That's not a recipe," she said. "That's what they are." She sighed and gave me one of her looks and went and got a recipe book. She found a recipe for cauliflower. She showed it to me. "Here," she said. "What about this?" "Fine," I said. "Let's check the box." We went in the garage and poked around amongst the dirt, the viruses, the man-eating spiders and the fruit flies. I pulled out the cauliflower. "That's not a cauliflower, you idiot," she said. "It's a cabbage." And now we've reached chapter 13 of The Monument, my novella about the Liège-Bastogne-Liège sportive. They left the bikes on the roof and headed off in the stonking red Mazda. It was about an hour's drive along the motorway to Stavelot. It was a good 3 hours before the pros were due to arrive, but the small town with its cobbled centre was filling up, and the side streets were full of parked cars, and they had to drive around a couple of times looking for a parking space before they finally found one. They walked a few hundred yards to the town square and found a bar which was already filling up with locals and visitors. A group of British cyclists sat in a corner, wearing team kit, drinking white wine and talking to some locals. One word I mentioned dated Jersey. "Is he a pro?" said Clovis. "No chance," said Eric. "He's 50 if he's a day and built like a brick shithouse." "Ex-pro then. Track star." "Deux cafés, s'il vous plaît," Clovis said to the barman. "Good idea," said Eric. "I'll have the same." The barman looked at him with a blank expression, but said nothing. He turned back to the coffee machine and made 4 coffees. €12, he said. "Do you take cards?" said Eric. Clovis looked down the bar. There was another room towards the back, and that was busy as well. A man sat with his back to them, thick-set, large head, curly hair. "Is that Wolfie?" he said. "Where?" "Down there. Got his back to us. Don't stare." "Let's get out of here. I don't like it." They downed their coffees and left the bar. "Don't run," said Clovis. They walked through the square and down the hill, following the road around, and then crossed over the river. Ahead was a nondescript suburban street stretching between some houses. As they turned the bend, it stretched almost straight up at a gradient they had not seen before. They continued walking. After 50 yards, Eric said, "No way I could ride up this. I'm not sure I can even walk up it. My legs feel like shit." "We need to get higher," said Clovis. "Get the best view." Groups of people were getting into position, although it was a good 2 hours before the pros were due. They reached a section about halfway up where the road bent slightly to the right, a small driveway on the right, a house on the hill to their left. After that, the fields closed in and the houses disappeared. An elderly marshal sat on a folding chair and gazed down the hill. "Here," said Clovis. They waited. After a while it began to rain, not heavily, but a steady damp drizzle. They huddled beneath the trees to avoid the droplets plashing down. "Can you hear a helicopter?" said Clovis. "I'm cold," said Eric, "and wet. I don't give a toss about helicopters." A policeman on a motorcycle went past, then another, and another. More motorcycles, then a steady stream of cars, followed by the publicity caravan, a smaller version of that which preceded the Tour de France. Pretty girls leaning out of windows or sunroofs or floats and flinging tat to the waiting crowds. Caps, little cakes, small salamis, plastic rain capes, more caps, little packets of Haribo, key rings, all disposable rubbish and mostly made in China. Clovis and Eric held their arms out and tried to catch the flotsam raining down on them. After the publicity caravan there was a lull. More people arrived and trudged up the hill, many continuing past their position and heading to the top. "There's a monument to Merckx at the top," said Clovis, "carved into a boulder." "I'm not going to the top," said Eric. "You can. I'm too tired." "Heavy night?" said Clovis. "You bet. Wasn't yours?" Clovis didn't reply. He was thinking of Jordan and the naked body so unlike the one he was used to. More motorcycles, more cars, closer together and going fast up the hill. The buzzing of the helicopter getting closer and closer, the commissaire's car, and at last a lone cyclist from the Trek team, swaddled in leg warmers, arm warmers, gloves, a buff poking beneath his helmet, seated and straining at the pedals, and the waiting watchers raised their phones as one to take photographs and shout "Allez, allez" at him. Then a short pause, and the rest of the breakaway came into view, bunched together, like newborn animals huddled together for warmth. And then another pause, and then the peloton, riding almost as one, seated and straining at the pedals, but moving as a cohesive group like a centipede, a couple of hundred legs seeming to pump in unison. And then the team cars, loaded down with bikes on the roof, VIP cars, an ambulance, press, more police, more motorcycles, and then the broom wagon, and soon all was quiet and the suburban street returned to its natural state, and the spectators flowed down the hill, a rivulet of people. Back on the bridge, Some people on stilts in national costume, wearing elaborate masks, seemed to reenact ancient rivalries. And Eric bumped into one, propelled by the crowd, and the man toppled off his stilts and landed heavily, and Eric carried on walking and tried not to look back. When they got back to the car, they found that the bikes were gone, and they watched as a blue Skoda drove away. Make sure you tune in to the next stage of the Misspoke podcast and find out what happened to Clovis and Eric's bikes. And now a slight change of tone. This podcast is about cycling and culture, not just about cycling. My daughter was watching Lewis the other day, one of her favourite programmes, and the episode was called "And the Moonbeams Kiss the Sea." And I said to her, "I've heard that before. Is it from a poem?" And she said yes, and she recited the poem for me. It's by Percy Bysshe Shelley, and it's called Love's Philosophy, and I thought I'd do it for you today. The fountains mingle with the river, and the rivers with the ocean. The winds of heaven mix forever with the sweet emotion. Nothing in the world is single, all things by a law divine. In one spirit meet and mingle, why not I with thine? See the mountains kiss high heaven, and the waves clasp one another. No sister flower would be forgiven if it disdained its brother. And the sunlight clasps the earth, and the moonbeams kiss the sea. What is all this sweet work worth, if thou kiss not me? And now to continue with my life in bikes. And if you'll recall from stage 15, I had been through a process of bike culling, and therefore needed to begin the process of buying a new bike. Canyon Ultimate 2014. Canyon was getting a lot of press. German, online only, excellent value. It was time for a spot of web surfing. The Ultimate was their race bike. Light, comfortable, fast, black, relatively cheap. What could possibly go wrong? The box arrived. I was an expert now with opening boxes. A certain amount of assembling was required, but I could do this. Attaching handlebars, slotting in wheels, tightening the headset, fitting pedals. I was almost a mechanic. It was matte black with Shimano Ultegra and Mavic wheels. Nice bike, mysterious, dark, and still relatively rare on the roads of Kent. Internet only. People pooed. You can't test ride it. German, they said. Actually, they didn't. I made that bit up. My friend Michael was keen on the track, and we went to Herne Hill Velodrome. On a Tuesday evening you could ride your road bikes. We went a few times, and one evening we decided to end with a pursuit race. He would start at one side and I would start at the other, and we would see who caught who first. I rode to the other side and prepared to set off. The next thing I knew, I was lying on the track in shock and with pains in my arm and hip and blood on my arm and shorts. A cyclist from Dulwich Paragon on a TT bike of all things, head down probably, not looking where he was going, had slammed into me from behind. Daft bugger. People helped me up, and I walked slowly to the pavilion, somebody bringing the Ultimate. I drove home and arrived just as the Ocado van was pulling up with the shopping delivery. My wife was not happy to see me emerge gingerly from the car, clutching my arm and with dried blood on my kit as the shopping bags were being dumped in the hallway. We were off to Cyprus a few days later, and so I sat around the azure pool with the Russian gangsters and their trophy wives and wore my bandaged arm like a prize. When we got back, I checked the bike, which seemed okay, but I thought it sensible to get a second opinion and took it to the bike shop. Alex phoned me a day later to tell me there was a crack in the seat stay, irreparable and unrideable. I knew that there were carbon frame repairers, but I had heard mixed reports about them, so I decided to write it off. And then someone asked me if I'd claimed on the insurance, which hadn't even occurred to me, so I phoned the insurance company. "What's the model?" I told them. "How much was it?" I told them. They checked on the internet for the current price. "What's your bank details?" I told them. "We'll send you a bank transfer." I said, "Don't you want to inspect it?" "No." "Are you just going to trust me?" "Are you lying?" "No." "Well then. Okay, I might try and reuse some of the components. Does that affect anything? Don't I have to mitigate my losses?" "Do what you like," they said. "You're entitled to a full refund under your policy." Jurassic Park. Money in my pocket and a free pass to buy a bike. What to do? I bought 2. And now a word from my sponsor. No, I don't actually have a sponsor, but if you know anybody in a large or multinational or small or even just a corner store looking to sponsor a podcast during the coronavirus pandemic, then please put them in touch. I went to Yorkshire with my daughter a couple of years ago and ended up buying some Kendal Mint cake. You must have tried Kendal Mint cake. Anyone who's ever done any kind of walking or hiking knows what Kendal Mint cake is. Basically, it's sugar with a bit of mint in it. Anyway, a cyclist friend of mine told me that Kendal Mint cake had just started making gels for cyclists, so I thought I'd order some. And I tried one the other day while doing a session on Zwift going up the Alpe d'Huez course. And it was quite tasty. It was the usual gloopy gel taste, or rather the usual gloopy gel texture. A bit like smooth phlegm, but with that real Kendal Mint cake mint kick to it that makes your mouth go cold and slips down and gurgles, freezing in your stomach. But I thought it was rather tasty. I also bought a chocolate mint flavour one, which I haven't tried yet, but I've got a box and I'm saving them for when I need them on the bike. So if you're looking for some new gels and you're tired with the rest of them, have a go at a Kendal Mint gel. They're pretty tasty and they're pretty minty. I'm going to end stage 16 of the Misspoke Cycling Podcast with a short story, and this one is called Lost. I hope you enjoy it. The group gathered at the roundabout for the regular Saturday club ride. Pigeons perched on the lampposts, and one dropped a load of shit onto Jimmy's jersey. "You've got shit on your jersey," said Clancy. "Fuck," said Jimmy. "Fuck, fuck, fuckty fuck." "They hate you," said Clancy. "Where are we going?" said Clovis. "I told you," said Clancy. "It's on the WhatsApp." "I didn't see it." "Not my problem," said Clancy. "Wait for me," said Lachlan. "I need a piss." He headed across the road and into the bushes. They stood around and stamped their feet until he returned. The group headed off, Clancy in the lead, then Clovis, Norton, Lachlan, Norman and Jimmy in the rear. It was a cold grey day, damp but not raining yet. The roads were busy with Saturday morning shoppers, drivers heading out on their chores. The dull expanse of South London suburbs, Bromley, Sundridge, Grove Park, Mottingham, Eltham, slipped by. Clancy led them off-road into parkland and paths. The road wound through the houses and came to a dead end. Clancy squeezed through the railings and onto the cycle path. Leaves hugged the ground and made it slippery. Clovis's wheel caught on the railings, and he tumbled backwards and landed heavily on the path. "Ouch! Fuck! Fuck!" he said. "You okay?" they all chorused. "Fuck!" he said again. He checked his bike over, felt his helmet for cracks, remounted, and they continued on. The cycle path was little used, and the ground was coarse and rutted, overgrown with weeds and trailing tree branches. They came upon a disparate group of elderly ramblers, heavy shoes, fleeces, anoraks, waterproof trousers, beanie hats, maps in plastic cases round their necks, walking sticks, rambling along, oblivious to everyone else. "Excuse me," shouted Clancy. "Cyclists coming through." The ramblers were deaf, keeping watch for butterflies and ragwort, centipedes and birds of prey. "Excuse me," shouted Clancy again. The ramblers huffed and sighed and moved to the side. "You should have bells," said one. "Why should I?" said Clancy. I don't drink. Snaking past Eltham Palace and then more suburbs. Bitter New Eltham, posh Blackheath, arty Greenwich, the edge of Charlton, up and over the hill by the Arsenal. Woolwich was scarred and desolate. Wind whipped through the shopping precinct. Impatient drivers pushing through the traffic, tensing at roundabouts, creeping forward at zebra crossings, tut-tutting at the slightest delay. They circled the roundabout, impatient truckers cursing at the ferry queue, slid down a slip road, and sudden silence enveloped them as they hit the Thames path. The path was smooth and well made, apartment blocks to the right of them, railings, mud, and the grey Thames to the left. The mud goes on forever, dark, gloopy and flat, with light dancing birds skating on its brown surface, the smell of baking shit oozing through the clear air from the sewage works. Coarse iron railings, few people. Here the riverside apartment blocks morph into blocks of flats, the neatly kept enclosed gardens now fly-tipped and grubby. Au pairs pushing prams give way to single mothers pushing buggies. Desperation at the river's edge, out here where the river ceases to flow. A tugboat chugs upstream, pushing loaded barges. Abandoned wharfs, jetties jutting out into nothingness. A rowing boat beached above the waterline. A broken motorcycle shoved into the lank, frothy water. A few people with thin, scarred arms, sitting in little huddles, sharing cigarettes. Concrete blocks were dumped at the water's edge. Everything felt dumped. Nothing was here out of choice. The water was grey. There were few people, a cycle path to nowhere. They've lost Jimmy. Every half hour their little wagon train halts, regroups, forms a circle, waits for Jimmy. I'm bleeding, said Clovis, looking at his bare leg. There was a smear of blood on his thigh. It's on my arm. Look. Blood was seeping through the sleeve of his jacket. Take your jacket off, said Lachlan. No, said Clovis. I don't want to know. I'll leave it till I get home. It'll stick, said Lachlan. When it dries, then it'll hurt. Thanks, said Clovis. I'll be strong. Tough guy, said Clancy. Clovis was hungry. He reached into his back pocket to grab some food. The energy bar was crumbly and sweet, sticky with dried fruits. Clovis took a bite and rewrapped it and stuffed it back in his pocket. Where's Jimmy? Said Clancy. Dunno. He was here a minute ago. Jimmy hoves into view eventually. Lost. Still lost. Jimmy's always lost. Hurry up, said Clancy. Don't tell me what to do, said Jimmy. Stop telling me what to do. Clancy looked at him, sighed, shook his head, said nothing. Silence hung in the air, threatening like a mugger. The group carried on. A mile further on, and Jimmy was off the back again. The fuck's he gone now? Said Clancy. Lachlan said he was here a minute ago. I'm fed up with this, said Clancy. Come on, leave him, let's go. Let the fucker find his own way home. That's not nice, said Lachlan. It's not his fault. Yeah? Whose fucking fault is it then? Jimmy appeared, sees everyone looking at him questioningly. What? He said. What? Nothing, said Clancy. Let's go. The path is finished and they hit the road. Heavy traffic, filter lanes, families rushing to the supermarket, squeezing through gaps. Everyone hanging on Clancy's wheel, desperate not to lose the slipstream, racing to beat the red lights. Some of us feel we ought to wait at red lights, said Clovis. Traffic lights, Dartford, cars waiting. There's a little car, maybe a Volkswagen or a Vauxhall, grey, cheap and nasty. Two lads, young, clean-shaven, seem pleasant enough. More in the back seat, probably, maybe girls. Where have you come from? Said a lad in the front seat. West Wickham, said Norton. I can pedal, look. The lad stuck his feet out of the side window and waved them in the air. He sniggered. The lights stayed red for a long time. What's it like? The lad said. Cold, said Norton. Where are you going? Get some drugs. Why'd you say that? We're just having a conversation. You come out with that crap. Where are you off to? Somewhere nice? Get some drugs. Forget it, said Norton. Crack. Heroin. Want some? That's just crap. You're talking crap now. Nice helmet. Mine's bigger. Silence. You in the Tour de France? Silence. The lights change. Cunt, shouted the lad as the car sped off around the corner. The narrow road weaved through the fields, dipping in and out of the woodland, dappled light drifting through the leaves. The road rose and fell, and Clancy pushed the pace higher. Riders were gasping for breath, out of the saddle, straining on the climbs. They missed the junction and had to turn round and retrace their pedals. They met Jimmy just by the junction, caught up at last. "Let's go," said Clancy. The BMW burst out of the gloom, the driver with his elbow on the windowsill, 2 fingers resting on the steering wheel. The car was black with opaque windows, a drug dealer's car. "Oi!" shouts Norton. "Slow down." Jimmy is riding near the middle of the road, occasionally drifting over to the wrong side of the white lines. Oncoming cars have to swerve to miss him. He shouted after one, waved his fist, made a gesture. "You're too far to the right," said Lackland. "Don't ride so near the middle of the road." "Don't tell me what to do," said Jimmy, belligerent. The road was long and the pace was high, but they finally reached the gates of Eden Farm Shop and Cafe. They rode across the muddy car park and around the corner to the bleak shed of the cafe. A group of mountain bikers were leaving and just mounting up. Baggy shorts, muddy legs, helmets with visors, dirt-encrusted bikes with big tyres. "Uh-oh," said one. "The professionals have arrived." They all trooped inside. It was near the end of lunch service and the serving ladies were having a snack. One rose to her feet as the group entered and slipped behind the counter. "What'll it be, gents?" she said. Jimmy dumped his helmet, gloves and phone on the table and headed to the counter. "Club rules," said Norton. "Keep helmets off the tables." Jimmy looked fierce. "Don't tell me what to do," he said. They ordered bacon sandwiches, cake and mugs of tea. Lackland ordered extra food and hot chocolate with cream and marshmallows on top. He worked shifts, lived far away and was always hungry. Never had time or inclination to eat before the meeting point. They clustered around the table with its plastic tablecloth, steam rising from their sweaty clothes. When they'd finished eating and been to the toilet, they trooped outside. A pretty woman was sitting at a bench cradling a cigarette. She watched as Clovis checked his bike over. "Where have you been?" she said to Clovis. "Woolwich," said Clovis. "Thames Path, Dartford, Erith." "How many miles?" said the pretty woman. She was dark-haired, slim, nice nose, brown eyes, friendly, chatty, in a good mood. 50 miles, Polly," said Clovis. 50 miles, she repeated admiringly. "Aren't you cold? You've got bare legs. They're very brown." "Thanks," said Clovis. "Just got back from holiday." "Where'd you go?" "Tenerife," said Clovis. "I've been to Tenerife," she said. "What's that on your arm?" "Blood," said Clovis proudly. "I fell off. Don't want to take my jacket off." "Ouch. It must hurt." "Nah," said Clovis. "He's been very brave," said Clancy. "He doesn't keep going on about it." Another woman came out of the cafe with 2 cups of coffee and gave one to her friend. "They've gone 50 miles, said the pretty woman. "He's hurt his arm, but he's being brave." "Yeah," said the coffee cup woman. "Everyone ready?" said Clancy. "Gotta go," said Clovis to the woman. They pushed off. The pretty woman smiled at Clovis. They rode out of the yard and onto the road with its slippery leaves. Clovis winced as his jersey rubbed on his arm. There was a dark patch on his elbow which spread down to his wrist. "You're in there," said Norton. "Imagine if I'd commented on her legs," said Clovis. "I'd be in right trouble." "You're in there," said Norton again. They pushed on down the hill to the traffic lights. "Which way are we going?" said Jimmy. "Shag Rabbit Hill," said Clancy. "Usual way." "See you at the top," said Jimmy. The hill was not hard, but as it came near the end of the ride and everyone was tired and they all wanted to race and be the first up, they pushed on, panting. Andrew reached the top first, then Clancy and Clovis. They pulled into a driveway and waited for the others and Jimmy. Norton arrived, long strings of pale spittle hanging from his chin. He crossed his arms on the handlebars and rested his head on his hands. He was panting, and his tongue was lolling from side to side. "Where's Jimmy?" said Clancy. "He was back about 100 yards, said Norton, bringing the words out gradually. "Did he make the junction?" said Clovis. "Yeah, I'm sure," said Norton. They waited. It was cold. "Got any plans?" said Clancy, to no one in particular. "Watch the rugby," said Norton. "Have a bath, glass of wine." "Get in the shower," said Clovis. "Sort my arm out." "What arm?" said Clancy. "What happened?" "Very funny," said Clovis. "Fuck off." Norton's phone buzzed. "Is it Jimmy?" said Clancy. "Where is he?" "It's not Jimmy," said Norton. "It's my wife." "Tell her I'll be round later," said Clovis. Norton stuck his tongue out. "Fuck off," he said. "I'm going," said Clancy. "I've had enough. It's getting cold." "What do we do about Jimmy?" said Norton. "Who cares?" said Clancy. "He can find his own way home. We can't wait forever." "Maybe he's lost," said Norton. "Maybe," said Clancy. "He could phone us if he was lost. People should know where they are. It's a club rule." He got on his bike, headed off into the traffic, stuck his arm up and waved behind him. "See you next week," he shouted, but it was lost in the wind. You've been listening to Stage 16 of Misspoke, a cycling culture podcast during the period of the coronavirus pandemic. Hope you've enjoyed it, and make sure you listen in to hear Stage 17. Take care.